Uh, Today, we're going to start the conversation with Dheeraj Pandey as our guest. Dheeraj is co-founder of Nutanix, which is a grand success story, one of the fastest growing unicorns in the industry. Some of you may be familiar with the story we recently did of Dheeraj's entrepreneur's journey on the blog. So I imagine that he's not a new phenomenon for you. But today, Dheeraj wanted to speak about his investment thesis and investment strategy in the tech business. So we're going to continue the conversation we've already had on the Entrepreneur Journey series, where he talked about his background as a founder of a really successful high-growth company and the challenges thereof. And we're going to talk about investment today. Welcome, Dheeraj. It's great to have you back.
Thank you, Shramana, and for the opportunity. And yeah, it's my birthday today, so it's a special day as well.
Oh, happy birthday!
Thank you.
Well, thank you for making time for this group on your birthday.
No problem.
So, Dheeraj, let's start by, however you want to introduce yourself, your investments, anything you want to discuss about Nutanix or DevRev before we get into the investment, you decide.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know me, I came here to the US exactly 25 years ago, 1997, when I was not even 22. And, Monica was talking about her Black Swan sort of event in her life. And I definitely believe in serendipities, and everything that has happened is about chasing a serendipity in some sense. Or I've always tried to work for small companies. So when I came here, I was a PhD student and in a small sleepy town like Austin, Texas. And obviously a lot has changed in Austin since then. I mean, it was the height of the internet bubble. A lot was happening in '98 when I came here to Redwood Shores for my internship for summers at Oracle. And I decided to take a leave of absence and decided to join the industry, worked for Trilogy Software in Austin, Texas for a year and a half, and really refused large company offers like Oracle and Microsoft several times to come and work for a really small company that Kleiner Perkins, Vinod Khosla had funded back in the day. Worked there for 3 years, saw the boom and the bust. Along the way, got married to my wife of 22 years now. Then went back to Oracle for 4.5 years, and then again a startup for 2 years. And since 2009, I've been an entrepreneur. In the last, I would say, 5 years, I've turned into an investor, but mostly a fly on the wall for most, stupendous entrepreneurs who I learn from and I learn with. And most importantly, when they ask me for something, the reason why I like to call it a win-win is because it's a great reminder for me as well as to how I need to run my own business and operations and stuff. So, because many of these things that people ask is not something that is unique to them, but it's also equally applicable to what I do on a day-to-day basis as well. So yeah, I think since 2009, grew Nutanix to a great number of friends. We made many millionaires as well along the way. People still talk a lot about the friendships that we had there, and I took it public in 2016, and in 2020 I figured I want to do something in the space of cloud service, and DevRev has been that opportunity to really think hard about makers, developers, product managers, and how do you get makers or creators closer to users, because that's where the real sort of failures start to happen, is when the handoffs are not good. And the listening from the users back to creators is messy, and there's too many departments in the middle, and there's too many tools. And I think creating that customer love is an art and a science. For the question is, can you make it into an engineering? And that's really the opportunity at DevRev for me. And then we are juggling a couple of other balls in my family with my chief investment officer and the team that he has come to have. So we have a family office, and I'm learning as well there in the family office about healthcare and biotech, and even things like nuclear fusion. We go deeper into those, and plant-based meat.
Dheeraj, is your funding of startups from the family office, or have you created a vehicle, or are you just doing angel financing? How do you operate structurally?
So the family office is a real sort of fund with a bunch of series in there as well, and we have different classes. So we've kept the structure because we have a real manager in our CIO, and we have employees, research analysts, and we and we'll talk about some of those questions as you get along with the interview as well. But it's a single family office. We don't have other families or other LPs in there. And yeah, I think we look at anything from early stage to growth. We've written very large checks as well. So, but at the same time, we are.
Our
Go
focus
ahead.
is on the early stage. Let's kind of double click down on your early stage work.
Sure. Sure.
How do you define early stage first and foremost? Is it pre-seed, seed, post-seed, pre-series A, series A? Where in that spectrum are you playing?
So unless I've known someone, we don't do seed. I don't believe in spray and pray, but if I get to know someone over 5 to 7 meetings, and sometimes tenacity helps as well, because you're like, okay, they must succeed if they're tenacious as well.
Yeah.
In the world of sales, I basically call it, fearless, and sometimes we would use the word shameless. You cannot have shame when you're asking for something, because you're
I know. I'm
running a
actually
business.
very used to hearing no all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And so, but we do Series A, Series Bs as well. We have been more and more like looking at software too, but we started out with biotech and life sciences. And lots of people that I have known in the last 15 years. I'm an advisor, an investor, and it's across geographies, so it's in the US as well as in Bangalore.
Let's talk about some examples. I will get into the kind of breakdown, but let's talk about some examples of your favorite investments and the story behind what precipitated that investment. It sounds like they're mostly from your network of people whom you've worked with or know somehow. Talk about some of the kinds of businesses that are drawing your attention right now.
Mm-hmm. So on the growth side, we've written some large checks for, again, it's the network's network, really, not really. It's not like I knew everybody in the network for the growth side. You know, I do have a bias for growth personally, including my CIO, but there it was just let's double down on things that we really believe in. And you don't get many such opportunities in growth anyway. Even though we've looked at a couple of exchanges where you can actually go into private growth side as well. Companies in the space of healthcare analytics in the cloud, and how they're applying the principles of Maya, which is most advanced yet acceptable. This is one of the principles that came from a very famous American designer, who his name is Raymond Louis, and he talks about the challenge of any innovation and how you try to bring something that's really advanced and it doesn't have social acceptance because people don't like revolutions, but you can give them something that's evolutionary, and then you can, over time, really disrupt something. So this idea of Maya is applicable to pretty much anything that I have invested in as well, as to how they've found the balance between being disruptive and at the same time making it feel to the end user or to the buyer that, this is doable. I can actually take these baby steps, these sort of little steps, and along the way I get the dopamine. It's not like I have to wait 3 years or something or change everything around me. We have invested in companies at scale, which manage cap tables for tens of thousands of startups out there. We have invested in constant glucose monitoring companies, who are trying to really figure this out in the space of wearables. We have invested in biotech companies doing, you know, um, things that like, new drug discoveries and things like that. We have looked at a lot of SaaS as well, and we've invested in quite a bit of SaaS off late in the last couple of years. And a lot of it has been around design, like, how do they express themselves through design? Because again, design is one way which endears your idea to people. So I've
Yeah.
been biased towards companies that have really expressed their ideas through good design, and especially in biotech and healthcare, it's been around companies that have a plan B, because you need to have a plan B in case plan A doesn't work. There is a lot of
What is an example of a company in biotech or healthcare where design has been a very significant driver of adoption?
so this, for example, this constant glucose monitoring company. Typically, and I've used these as well, just because I'm curious about my own blood sugar. There's a little half-inch pin that pierces your body, and it's somewhat painful, and it only does one thing, and one thing only, which is uh, blood sugar, it's glucose. But then this company is trying to do this extremely topically at the surface with a uh, nanotechnology like approach, and the wearable is like a watch, and it can actually also go as a patch. And now you have to think really hard about what else would people like to do. Could this get into cholesterol monitoring and other such things? So it's multi-purpose as well. But there's a lot of design that goes into this too. I mean, like, I had an Aura ring for a long time. I gave it to my son.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and Aura is another such thing. I mean, I would have loved to invest in Aura early on. I just
Mm-hmm.
hope that they actually flourish over time, because there's a lot that's going on in that space in wearables too, which is going to come down to design and reducing friction.
Yeah, wearables I think is a very interesting industry that is going to be entirely design driven. Otherwise, it's not going to find adoption.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what about on the IT side, whether it's healthcare IT or software driven solutions? What have you invested in that is interesting?
So, we've done a late stage, growth side of investment in a healthcare analytics company again, and they're trying to surround Epic, so which is kind of the mainframe of healthcare. And I think it's a very interesting sort of play, because they're not going directly after the quote unquote mainframe. And again, it's how do you really take healthcare to the cloud? There's so much regulation in that industry. So you got to do it cleverly. You got to do it in ways that also connect some of this back to the patients as well, which is where um, I think the overall delight starts to come from the end users back to providers, and I think it becomes a very useful way to sell your technology to big hospitals, and because you start to see that you're engaging with your patients. But then it also is helpful for insurance companies, because they start seeing how it could reduce their liabilities, if you actually are in the space of population health, for example, and having patients come back on time as opposed to being reactive. How do you make them proactive and so on? So I love this space because it's not going head on after something that's very, very stodgy, but extremely bureaucratic in the way decisions are made in healthcare, given how much regulation there is in that industry. But over time, they probably will. They will get to the sort of main screen of the doctor when they log in and so on. I think doing this outside in has been extremely innovative, and I've been a big fan of such a company as well. So yeah, I
So
think
data is kind of your DNA. You come from the data world. How do you see the trends and opportunities in data? Can you, like, if you were starting another company today in the data space, whether it's real-time data, big data, machine learning, et cetera, is there or are there some problems that you have spotted that could be opportunities for new entrepreneurs to start new companies?
I think it'd be cliche, but to say this right, I think you have to do this very inexpensively because people do a ton of experiments in data. And I think converting data to information, especially by the industry, by the vertical, still requires a lot of domain knowledge. So, like what we are doing at DevRev now is to really take a ton of this data and software engineering and customer engineering and support. And even on the growth side, there's a lot of data on the growth engineering side. So how do you create canonical models so that people don't have to go create data warehouses and do analytics on top of that? I think it's still a pretty expensive thing to really crunch data into information. And finally, to even visualize it, I mean, is a pretty hard problem. Even with machine learning, I think the biggest challenge is data engineering, because many of the scientists, the data
Mm-hmm.
scientists, they're not good at engineering.
Mm-hmm.
They're good at science, but not really good at engineering. And that includes collectors, all the way to masking, because you still have a lot of regulatory requirements, compliance requirements to deal with. All the way from that to transformation to loading it on an everyday basis into a massive uh, database or data warehouse or some such thing. And then running some compute on it, because you might have to run some logic before it actually gets ready and refreshing models. All that stuff is still a pretty complicated thing, and a couple of companies have done it well. But I think it's still not available to every industry out there. I think we probably have made something for the tech world, but to really make it pervasive and really bring it back to design, I think it's one of the things I'll say again. How do you visualize all of that? I mean, I'm a big fan of New York Times visualization. you
Mm-hmm.
know, it saved the company in almost 20 years, 15 years ago. I would say most newspapers were actually going down the drain, and here comes New York Times. And of course, you could say it's because of their subscription model, and obviously they build their own ad network. But at the core, I think New York Times is a design company, and it's not just known for its font, which they developed in 1937 and how everybody uses it today. But I think the culture of design has really been a big force
Mm-hmm.
of innovation for them. So I think, at the end of the day, visualizing data is still a pretty difficult challenge, and developers are doing it with new tools on the browser and open source and such. But I think beyond developers, if you go to non-developers, I think it's still a big challenge.
So, name the companies that are very expensive to use, but at least address the kinds of problems you're talking about, data engineering, visualization. What companies are on your radar, even though they're expensive, at least hit some portion of the solution?
Well, we kind of know of the language abstractions. I mean, SQL-based data warehouses. I mean, if anything, Snowflake did an amazing job in the last 10 years to make it more accessible because um, data was still locked in, sort of a few people sort of, I would say, bureaucracy with their hardware and things like that. I mean, I helped create some of those back at Oracle, but we created big systems, and these were hardware-based systems that had the traditional Oracle software, but not many people had access to it because not because
Very
of just the
expensive.
fact.
No, it's very expensive.
Sorry, say that again, Sramana.
Sounds like it's very expensive.
Yeah, and expensive, and also they're not elastic. You just couldn't. I mean, cloud gave access to systems, not just because you could swipe a credit card. I mean, commerce was easy, but also because things were elastic and fluid. You can shut them up and spin them up on an every hour basis. So I think the idea of applying cloud to data warehousing was a big deal. I think we see that with Databricks, for example. They came up with a new abstraction of stream
Yeah.
processing, but again, done at scale. And of course, SQL came back to them because everybody was familiar with SQL as a language. So they applied SQL on top of streams. And I think it's been a really, really clever way of, again, it's Maya, at the end of the day, most advanced idea of thinking about streams, but then apply SQL on top of it, look at, windows of data, things like that in real time or near real time. But people are still struggling to build pipelines because they break all the time. There's very little observability for these pipelines. And you need very expensive talent to manage these things at scale.
Yeah. Which is a huge bottleneck. Wow.
Absolutely. I mean, of course, I can't forget about everything that we're doing at Adobe as well on the marketing side. Tons of data around customers and what they use, what they don't use. I think we've done a phenomenal job of all the clicks that users want to do on an everyday basis and product launches and bringing it all in real time to the CMO's office. But I think it's early days in this space as well.
So, speaking about Adobe and visualization in particular, where do you see the visualization side of data? We've seen Tableau. Tableau was a very big success. Actually, we've done the Tableau case study both from the founder's point of view as well as it was Scott Sangle from NEA who invested in Tableau, and he said it's one of the best ROI investments he's ever made because it took so little money to get so much return. But we haven't seen a whole lot on the data visualization side since then, really.
Yeah, I mean,
Have you seen anything in your deal flow? Have you seen stuff that are interesting?
yeah. I mean, if you look back, you peel the onion on Tableau, I think there's two things they did well. One is the visualization language. There's a domain-specific language around how do you really write a little bit of code. Like it's really a low-code way of building dashboards. And so what they did was they democratized dashboard building, not just through drag and drop, no code, which had limitations, but really low code. And they created a whole army of data analysts who could go and create this on the
Yeah.
fly and so on. But the second innovation that they brought, this is back in 2005 through 10, because they had to compete with Excel, they had to make it consumer grade in terms of commerce, like credit cards, over the internet, you
Mm-hmm.
know, $1,000 customer, $2,000, $5,000 customers. So they have tons and tons and tons of small customers, which now we call it with a new name called PLG, product-led growth. But they were one of the originals. They and Atlassian and Adobe were some of the originals, and maybe even Intuit in that space, originals in PLG. And I think that carried the day for them for like 15 years or whatever, 13, 14 years until their acquisition. I think if you look at what ThoughtSpot is doing now, I'm a
Mm-hmm.
big fan, not just because Abhijit and Sudhish are really close to me, but also because the way they're building it on top of Snowflake is actually quite unique. they are taking their visualization strength and really applying it on top of a very popular data warehouse out there in the cloud. And I think we actually see more visualization companies come out in the coming years simply because of the power of the browser now. The browser is doing a lot. So no code definitely is out there. I haven't seen a low code company in the space of visualization which has made it utterly simple and joyous to really create new dashboards and such. And I think those who really create immensely delightful visualizations like New York Times are like they're one in a million, no pun intended.
So I think you've touched upon a few different open opportunities, and this is always interesting for entrepreneurs looking for ideas to build on. Number one, you've talked about the gap in the visualization space. There's still, there's a lot of data solutions out there, back-end data solutions, but when it comes to presenting that data in, delightful ways or really user-friendly ways, that's an area where there could be a lot more done. And the second thing that I find interesting in where you're going is a lot of technologies, especially on the data engineering side, data side in general, data handling side, are very expensive. So they're affordable for large enterprises, they're affordable for, let's say, mid-sized enterprises, but when it comes down to small businesses, it's not very accessible just because the price point is too far out. So where is the affordable version of that? One of our favorite case studies in 1Mby1M, and it really is tremendously popular, is the Zoho case study, Sridhar Vembu taking on Salesforce.com and really offering something that has been pervasive in the small business world. It's been pervasive and definitely product-led growth, definitely very, very high adoption. Doing that to the more complex technologies on the data side that makes heavy-duty data capabilities, data handling capabilities accessible for the mid-market and the small businesses, it seems it's still quite wide open. Would you agree with that? Yeah?
Yeah, and maybe there is a meta observation there is, you have inexpensive products and you have easy to use products. And many a time they're not one and the same.
That's
And
right.
of course, you add a little bit more to it, like extensibility, customization. That's where you can't have even two out of the three. At least people say that you can get two out of three things in life, but either you have very cheap products that are great for SMB, or there's like delightfully well-designed products, but they're not customizable. And if you have something that's designed well and it's highly customizable, it's too expensive.
Yeah. Well, Dheeraj, so if you look back at the skill set of our industry, right, design is one of the lowest, importance skill sets. Other than if Steve Jobs hadn't done what he did with Apple, design would not have even been discussed in the tech world. That was the beginning of design coming in a serious way into our industry, definitely on the consumer side. But we haven't seen a lot of enterprise products that are really focused on design. There's very little out there that can rely on a skill set of really fantastic design to hide complexity and make things seriously usable. The New York Times example that you're giving is it's from the consumer side, and it's not from the complex technology side at all. The complex technology side has a blind spot on design, complete blind spot on design.
Right. I think it's very true, but things are changing, and also because of the outsiders coming in, Shramana. So if you look at even wearables, I think what Apple will do to the, you know, overall vertical healthcare, I think it's going to be massive. Even what
Massive.
Amazon will do, I mean, I look at design as not just about the user interface of interaction, but also commerce. I mean, what Amazon can do to pharmacy, I'm just so excited and stoked to say, okay, you know what? I can do it
Absolutely.
so differently than my local grocery store where things are still extremely arcane, you know? So I
Yeah.
think outsiders coming in will be one way to shake this industry up. And honestly, in B2B, a lot has changed in the last 10 years. I mean, we don't give credit to Google for design, but one of the biggest things about design is like uh, low latency. You know, how do you really create low latency products? And they had a culture of, okay, every search result has to return within less than 100 milliseconds.
Mm-hmm.
And that was industry transforming in many ways, you know.
Yeah.
So the idea of giving dopamine to people in such tight loops like 100 milliseconds is as important and an invisible part of design that we don't really appreciate. So many companies that do that well, I think there are many more happening in the last 10 years for sure. And you can see these decade. I mean, I know of many of my friends whose children, they're very good at STEM, but they want to do art.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the sort of self-actualization of parents as well, that, you know, they're like, you know, you should go and pursue art and get into design. And so I'm very hopeful that the coming years, and you talked about this in one of your observations, that look, everything has been done. And I feel like what we've done is like more like physics has been done, but chemistry has not been done, and biology has not been done. It's like it took 9 billion years for biology in this universe to come. So the idea of, you know, integrating uh, different pieces of information from different systems, doing them really, really well through design, and the idea of recommendations and having bots and machines do way more than what they have, I think we're still scratching the surface. And simply because
Absolutely.
it's a modeling problem. You know, if you can't model the data, if you can't model the industry, if you can't model the business workflows, you can do recommendations, you can do visualizations, you can do many of these things. You know.
Yeah. You know, this is a topic that I've been very passionate about, the Renaissance mind, you know, pursuing and exploring and leveraging the Renaissance mind, the cusp of the left brain, right brain mind that can handle both sides. I actually have a large body of writings on this. And if you follow me on LinkedIn, there is a series that I do called Colors, where I publish paintings and I ask people to meditate on just that painting for 2 minutes. And I publish that on LinkedIn during the weekends and on Facebook 3 times a week, basically twice during the
Beautiful.
weekend and once in the middle. But the whole point is to draw attention to the visual impact of colors, of, you know, of, of design in general. I wrote a series quite a few years ago. I can't even remember when it was. Maureen might remember, on the future of Silicon Valley being at the cusp of design and technology, leveraging the Renaissance mind, but it hasn't gone that way. You know, I thought um, that movement of bringing those two sides together would come together within the technology space faster. But instead, went deep into data, into AI, into machine learning, and kind of the design side went by the sidelines, and the liberal arts side, right, the humanities side, kind of went on the sidelines. So that remains still to be done. You know, we talk about social media, right? Social media today is kind of just barely scratching the surface because it's all kind of very highly spread out and spray and pray kind of social media. Real relationships don't happen in that mode. Real relationships happen when you go deep. And the whole social media design structure has been focused on going broad, whereas real relationships, real friendships, you call it Facebook friends, but that's not friendship. Real friendships happen when you go deep and when you actually spend in, if you're talking about groups, it has to be very small groups for meaningful conversations to happen. Sitting around the table when before COVID, we did a lot of entertaining. Even in COVID, we have kind of cut it back to very small numbers. And actually, the conversations are much richer. When you put 4 to 6 people around the table over a meal, it's a much deeper, much more interesting conversation than if you have, 50 people at a party. So those nuances have not started coming into, interaction design really.
No, I think, and you're right. I mean, in many ways, social media had a role to play at the base of the pyramid of interaction, because there's lots and lots and lots of, I call them sand interactions, there's billions of sand particles. So you need to really figure out that interaction through digitization, at least it's better than snail mail, what you can do on Facebook and so on. So the base of the pyramid interaction was taken care of by the last 15 years of social media. Now there's a middle of the pyramid, and we'll see whether, AR and VR will actually help there. But the top of the pyramid, bespoke relationships, deep relationships, you're right. It's always going to be, human to human, even what we're doing right now. I mean, and we say this about remote work, that, everybody's now, it's fashionable to say we are completely remote or something and no employee needs to come to work or something. But it's when you're designing a new product, when you're building new things, when you need to go get on a whiteboard, as Nicholas Taleb would say, you got to create these moments of serendipity where people just bump into each other, they have hallway discussions, and, those water cooler discussions are still very important. So you're right. I think we're scratching the surface of interaction. But I feel like AI and design are actually two sides of the same coin, because what machines will recommend, there was a really good article in the Wall Street Journal maybe 6 months ago. I'll forward it to you too. It's like even humans as users, we actually embrace bots that are not very arrogant. So there's this feeling of, what? I'll give you a chance. Your recommendation might not be the best, but because you're humble, I'm like, that is telling. The fact that as humans, we look at bots that are better designed as being less arrogant says something. So we have to look at AI and design as two sides of the same coin. I mean, we struggle with notifications all day long. Like every day we get so many
Yeah.
notifications. Every app that we have come to deploy, and there's a lot that machines can do in saying, okay, you don't even care as a user for these kind of notifications and so on. So the training that we as users can do to bots, but the way the bots bring back some of those
I think
new
AI is a
recommendations to us.
fantastic tool for designers, right? Because the holy grail of design is simplicity. And if the complexity is managed by AI underneath and the number of options of what to do in the interaction can be minimized and more accurate, more and more precise, it makes the designer's job a lot easier.
Yeah, and I think it makes the bots more embraceable by people.
Yeah. Well, we could keep talking for a long time. Maureen is actually providing you with the link to all of you who are listening to this conversation, the link to my Silicon Valley the Next Decade series. And if you like this discussion, this is a series that you may want to take a look at. It talks about the Renaissance mind and the salons of the Renaissance Paris and so on and so forth, and how ideas were, being exchanged and ideas were developing in a more human context. So,
Beautiful.
Dheeraj, shall we listen to Monica's pitch?
Yeah, let's do that.